Zhang. She is an established and in-demand speaker in areas of financial wellness, personal and small business finances, and the psychology of money. With over 15 years of experience in the field, she has trained thousands of volunteers to deliver financial education in communities, spoken at conferences around needs of Canadians in managing their money, and conducted national consumer research to better understand the financial issues impacting Canada. We'll send a more elaborate bio when we send the video down, but I wanted to start off really with a comment. I did a little bit of research before the webinar, just to want to make sure I knew what I was talking about. And I find, Lee, that the percentage of Canadians that are financially literate, as according to a CIBC survey, is about 86%. So I don't even know why we're having the webinar. 86% of the population knows exactly what they're doing and they're financially literate. In 2023, CIBC did a survey and a poll. 78% of Canadians are confident in their ability to teach their children financial literacy. 86% are knowledgeable about day-to-day budgeting, and 53% are knowledgeable about investing in and wills and estate planning. But 49% wish they knew more. What does financial literacy actually mean? Because I think Canada is living in a world of illusion and delusion based on those numbers. Tell me your thoughts about what is financial literacy.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of research in the almost 15, 20 years that I've been in this space, and definitely our numbers are not that high. And it really depends on how you ask those questions. So when you look at financial literacy as a concept, what does that mean? So the federal government tried to describe this about 10 years ago, and they put together that knowledge piece as well as the confidence and capabilities of making decisions that are financially healthy for you. Now, what it doesn't actually say is that you're actually making those decisions to your benefit. So when we look at the evolution of what financial literacy is today, we're generally talking more about financial wellness, because it's not enough to know what you should be doing. You actually have to do it. I always equate this whole healthy living piece. We all know we should probably eat less, move more. That doesn't mean we do it. And so if we don't do it, then we're not actually living healthy. And so when we look at finances, it's the same. Perhaps we know that we should budget. We know we should save more, maybe spend less on frivolous things based on our values. But if we don't do that, then there's no impact to our actually financial wellness, financial well-being.
And I would say most people don't. They don't do it. I mean, when we go and see the average deposit and the account values of RSPs as an example, or TFSAs last year outstripped our RSPs in terms of the deposit amount. Now, the deposit amount on average for an RSP is about $3,900 nationally, a little higher in Nunavut because there's nothing to do with your money, I guess, up there. They save about $4,500. But if you go to Stats Canada and the average per province, the national average is about $3,900 in an RSP, and the TFSA is a bit higher. Why do you think that might be?
Well, that's where education comes into play, right? And we know, I mean, you've been an advisor for many years, and so I would even ask you, do you think that, you know, the financial literacy or financial knowledge of Canadians are indeed that high? And I would even use, you know, your clients throughout the years to say, do 86% of them feel like they could manage their own money? I would think that's kind of doubtful. But yeah, when you look at something like a TFSA and RSP, we get that question a lot, right? So where do I put my money? I have an extra $2,000. And it really depends, because a lot of individuals don't realize that you want to bank RSP contribution room, especially if you're going to make more, because it scales. So if you're 18 and you have, you know, your first RSP contribution room, that is not where you're going to put your money, because it's really hard to take out. So if you're gonna buy a used car because you're getting your first job, or you want to buy a home, or you want to start a family, really not going to be convenient if you have an RSP, right? And then you want to put your money in your TFSA. So I think what's happening really is that we talk a lot about how TFSAs are really convenient, they're really easy. We all know that CRA had, kind of all those issues about calculating those, so it does get a little complicated. But you hear that, and so you think, okay, so if I have good money management, if I'm really good at managing my money, I need to have a TFSA. But the question you're asking yourself is, do you? Like, where are you in your stage of life to say, I need a TFSA versus RSP? And I think it's moments like this where financial literacy plays a critical role, because for advisors, it's also understanding the situations their clients are in to say, whoa, TFSA is really good for the short-term stuff, but you have all this contribution, you're probably at the peak income level. So you really should be capitalizing on those savings, and perhaps in your retirement years, how you're going to mix those assets. And so those are the conversations that really help clients determine the best products for themselves and also really feel confident that they're making the right choice.
So why do you think that financial literacy fails to resonate with many clients? Again, like we said, the number one thing, there's top 5 things you can do if your debt is too high. One is create a budget. Most people don't adhere to a budget. Most people don't want a budget. And very few people are analytical enough to actually follow a budget because our wants outstrip our needs every time. Hence the TFSA. You put money into a TFSA and all of a sudden your buddies say, let's go to Mexico for a week. They drain the TFSA and go to Mexico. Now that tax-free savings account saved about 2 cents on tax while it was sitting there, but now it's gone. The other one is to prioritize repayment. So if you go to people who have a space in social media, like Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, one of their first steps is to save an emergency fund, start paying off debt, prioritize the repayment, and pay the smallest debt off first. Is their snowball effect? There's philosophies out there, and then cut back on expenses. Most people don't want to give up their latte at Starbucks to save money for their future. How do we get the average Canadian, or most Canadians, and not even average, to have financial literacy resonate with them, and what should we call it instead, so they actually apply what it is you talk about?
There's a lot there, John. I'm going to
I
try to
know,
I'm
I
going to
know.
cover all
Please.
those questions in one. Well, financial literacy is not what I call the sexiest topic in the world. I think what often happens is when you hear financial literacy, I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably homework. You think about, reading literacy, you think about numeracy literacy. It sounds really boring, like you're going back to school. And also, I think there's a level of shame and embarrassment that gets tied to money. Like money is actually a very complex space, and this is why I love talking about money all the time, because so much of ourselves are tied to money, and so is our identities. And so it's a very emotional piece of our lives that we don't actually recognize as such. And so we're more likely to talk about our sex lives, about religion, before we'll even tackle the idea of talking about money. So that's the big barrier, right? Like we don't socialize the concept that it's okay to talk about money. You think about how many friends have you ever asked the question, oh, how much do you make? Right? Crickets. Like we just don't talk about it because in a way it's like, well, Dawn, you make 25% more than me. So does that mean I am worth 25% less as a person compared to my cohort, my counterparts, my age? And then that becomes a whole measurement of your own self-worth. So we try to avoid that because we want to feel good about ourselves. We want to think, hey, we're doing okay, the kids will be all right, etc. So what should we call it instead? I love this idea of making it inspirational and aspirational. And so I know when I say this, there's going to be a number of people listening to this who are going to roll their eyes. But what is money ultimately? And now I'm taking away the people who don't have their basic needs met, okay? Because that's a very different group. So if you are living paycheck to paycheck, really worried about putting food on the table for your family, these are not the people I'm talking about. But for people who generally have stable income, stable lives, it's really about making our dreams come true, right? What do we want to achieve in this life? What's important to us? And so I love this question of saying or asking, Tell me your dream. What is it? Is it owning your first home, buying a new car, having a latte every day? There's no wrong answer, right? Because it's very individualized and it's very much tied to also the experiences we've ever gone through in our lives. If we grew up in, an economic upswing or downturn, it's really going to shape our emotions around money and how we view money. What about our relationship with our parents, who are our first role models? Did they grow up in a time of scarcity? Did I grow up in a time of scarcity? That is really going to impact how I spend money, how I save money, and how I interact with my, network of advisors, so to speak.
What do you think the impact is? I mean, where people get most of their knowledge today in terms of money, and the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs, and even the baby boomers are getting it off of the internet. So on social media, either on TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, someplace. What's the impact of influencers and platforms like TikTok on younger clients and their perception of financial literacy and financial advice?
Well, Don, get the lingo right. They're finfluencers.
There you go, for influencers. Sorry.
So yeah, so finfluencers, I mean, this is my non-PG way of saying things, but there is a lot of trash online, like a lot. Just and finfluencers are something that keeps me up at night because we know that it's a complex algorithms that decide what you get to see. And the things that they'll feed you are generally what's going to be the most popular. And when it comes to money, it tends to be a lot of get rich quick schemes. Okay, because everybody's looking for a shortcut. I can share that because my brother is like king of get rich quick schemes. But we all know when it comes to money, if we're all living average lives, and there's nothing wrong with that, that there are no shortcuts to life. But how I would view it is it's a fact of life, right? Even if I say, hey, I hate these 10 finfluencers, they're finfluencers because they have a following. So I think you turn this to your benefit as an advisor. You know that they exist. You know that your clients, old, younger, youngest, are all, on it. Either Instagram, TikTok is a big one. And so you use that to your advantage and you start that conversation and ask, hey, is there someone you follow? Is there something that you're interested in talking about? Because here's the thing, right? You can cut off bad decisions if you know they're coming, right?
Right.
And so have that opportunity to have that conversation about what the right, financial literacy lesson here is. And I mean, not all of it is terrible. There's a lot of great materials out there that teach you how to budget, teach you how to, save a buck. My personal favorite right now is How to Eat Like a Peasant, which is really trending because, obviously with the issue of affordability. So I've learned a lot of really interesting cooking hacks. I don't know if I'd ever eat those, but I know they exist. But it's again an opportunity, especially if you have, clients who are starting to get younger. It's a way to start a conversation, it's a way to relate to them and also be there to support them and correct some of the misconceptions that, have their 5 minute of fame online.
I like that. Actually, that's a great comment, Lee. I like that. That's a question I'm going to add to my repertoire of questions that you should ask is, are you following anybody currently, or who are you following on TikTok or Facebook or whichever platform you're looking at? So everybody, make sure you add that question to your repertoire. The other thing that came up recently is we had Tom Deans speak to our group. We did a webinar with him not too long ago, and then we had him at the Ontario Education Day. And he's written a book called I don't know if you can see that, probably not. No, there it is,
Oh,
The Happy
okay.
Inheritor.
Yep.
And your comment related to this is, why are inheritors often firing their parents' advisors?
Do you
What,
have an answer for that, Don? I mean, you're in the industry. What do you
I
think?
would I would give you one, but you go ahead. You're here as the expert. I'm just here as the asker.
Hey, I mean, there's something about also practical lived experience, Don. I think one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing in, advisors and family offices is that we're not engaging the whole family. There's definitely a primary client, generally either, generally male, let's be honest. Although there are exceptions to that. And I think it's such a missed opportunity because we've been talking about the, largest wealth transfer of our generation. And honestly, and again, you can agree or disagree, but I really think that it's already starting to happen, right? And that we're talking about living transfers at this point. It's not about I've kicked the bucket and here's all your inheritance. But I do find that if you as an advisor are not engaged with some of your younger clients who really think differently, it's really interesting when you dig into the research, everybody has the same needs and wants, except everybody thinks, oh, well, they're a different generation. It's a different situation. They will have different needs and wants. It's actually all the same. But if they don't feel heard or if they don't feel seen, they're going to be like, well, Don, were the advisor to my dad. So
Hmm.
when it comes to my turn, Don doesn't understand me. He doesn't get how I want to spend my money, how I want to live my life. And if Don, as my advisor, took the time as a family unit to talk about it, you're not only helping you retain the customer, but you're also helping your primary client share what his ideas are for that inheritance. There's a lot of conflict that happens when you have, the client who's like, oh, I really wish this money would support their education, would support their first home or my grandkids. And then you have the inheritance who have a whole different idea of what that is. So if you can play the role of communicator, of translator, of, a collaborator, bring everybody together, there's so much value in that. And because, like, you look at the high net worth families, most of their advisors are part of the family. And I've heard these stories where, they'll sit on, family trusts and boards and things. And so how are you adding value on that front? And I think this is the time to do it before your clients get older and actually pass on the majority of their inheritance.
Just because we're running short of time, I want to make sure I get you these questions. But what delivery, how would you deliver financial literacy to our constituents, whether they're group members or group plan members or individuals? What would some of your suggestions be as to how to deliver that information to those people?
I think the first thing that's really important is the content has to meet your audience. And there's two ways to look at it. One is delivering just in time information. So money is often, I mean, we know there's a couple of things. For example, like we know that if it's insurance, the earlier I get it, the cheaper it is, the better it is.
Hmm.
But until you give them a burning platform, perhaps it's the birth of their first child. That's a great example of when, insurance now actually matters. If you're a single person, less critical, but making sure the content matches their life stage and what they're already thinking about. Because if you tell an 18-year-old how if he invests today for retirement, he can invest less, which is true, not many 18-year-olds are going to take you up on that because they're thinking about going to post-secondary, they're thinking about their first job, they're mentally not there. So you have to make sure that the content matches the individual. Then the second piece to that is this idea of sophistication, right? A lot of your clients are going to be anywhere on that spectrum from you need the basic ABCs to, okay, let's talk about estate planning because we're there and all the facets of that, because I feel like that's probably one of the more complex pieces and the hardest one to talk about because you have to say that, mortality is a real thing and one day I'll die. That's always a really exciting conversation that's uplifting. And then finally, I would say in person is always better. I mean, here we are virtual, and we live in a virtual world. But when you're dealing with these topics, it is so much better to deliver this content in person. And so when we run the programs with CPA Canada, I always say I would really prefer in person because you get that immediate feedback. And as advisors, you've been in situations where you told a client something and you can see the light turn on and
Hmm.
you have them. That, hey, that made sense to me. That's a good idea. And so having that ability, I think, to be in person is really important. And then finally, the point I want to make is having different touch points that reinforce the lesson. once is often not enough, right? If I give you a pamphlet and a flyer, you may have read it, but it's not internalized. So find different opportunities to promote that message. Maybe you have a newsletter that you send to clients, and this month it's all about, hey, make sure you've put in your money for TFSAs, or your RSP contributions are coming to deadline. What does that mean? Should you be investing? So always reinforcing the messages that you want to pass along.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we provide our advisors is a discount on Advisor Stream, which is articles that you can send regularly to your clients and or prospects. I think that would be a good way to get those ideas out in front of them. Also, like the idea of the introduction from like the parent to the child to start those conversations about planning for their future or paying off university, college debt, those kinds of things. How can advisors frame financial literacy in a way that inspires action without the shame or overwhelming them, though? There's so much, like you just said. I'm 18, and our target market obviously isn't 18-year-olds, but let's say 25, first job, maybe getting serious with somebody, thinking possibly of getting a down payment for a home. How do we reframe that so they realize they don't have the money for a down payment? That's probably going to be borrowed from their parents or given to them from their parents. And then we get them off on that launching pad to the future, their financial future. How do we frame that conversation?
I think it's important to take, as you mentioned, the shame element of it, right? Be open and ask them, hey, what are the 5 things that worry you about your money? Right? Understanding their histories, their relationship to money, their challenges, ask them, right?
Mm,
Because that's a way for you to really understand what some of their psychological needs are, right? We talk about money story a lot. That's critical. We talk about any traumas or any issues that they have gone through that changes their perception of money. And perhaps one of the things they worry about is, and I know a lot of women have this worry, is will I have enough?
right.
And so now okay, so let's and as advisors, you have access to really, sophisticated programs that help you determine these things. So you go through that with them, and it gives them a sense of comfort, and it's an opportunity for you to help them stay on track, right? You give them something to work towards, and then they're going to learn along the way and feel more confident about it. And it's
Mhm,
really, in my experience, really helpful to make information and actions bite-sized pieces, right? It's
mhm.
so overwhelming to be like, I'm going to put together a financial plan with you. OMG is what I'm going to say, right? Because
Right, right,
you got to go call, Service Canada. You got to go figure out if you've worked more than one place. What are your pension things? What about OAS? When do I take CPP? That's so overwhelming. So you
right.
break it down for them and you say, hey, before our next meeting, let's look at these 2 things. And then you
Hmm.
slowly build them up to it, because the moment you give them an avalanche or a mountain to cross, they're out, right? They're
Hmm.
just going to show
Yep,
up and be like, "Hey, Don, like, good
yep.
conversation,"
Yeah, they
right?
get paralyzed. Yep.
Exactly. But we all do, right?
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. And the
Hmm.
and the amount of stuff that you don't know. And to also share with them, hey, a lot of Canadians are struggling with this. How are you doing with this? To make it seem like they're not alone. I think that's really important, that like you're not the only one who perhaps doesn't understand your credit card.
Right.
Or lots, you'd be surprised. Minimum payment. I get that question a
Oh
lot.
yeah,
I just
all
make
the
my
time.
minimum payment, and I have
Yeah,
to stop myself from like going,
yeah,
why? Because we don't know what their story is. We don't know if they grew up differently, if and in Canada come from a different culture where they're unbanked. They've never worked with a banking institution. So how are they supposed to know that there are different accounts? And so making sure that we keep an open mind, but also giving them information and seeing how that's received will give you a sense of where they're at in their journey.
Two final things. One, I want you to tell us a little bit about becoming a financial literacy volunteer. What's that all about? How does
All
that
right.
help us?
So, our program, so I'm obviously here with CPA Canada. We have a national financial literacy program. So we go into community from coast to coast to coast, even as far as Iqaluit in the north. And what we've done is we've created kind of that financial education journey, and we invite organizations, community groups, businesses to reach out to us and say, hey, our audience would love a session on effective tax strategies, or the 10 healthy habits of financial management. And then we have thousands of CPA volunteers across the country that volunteer and go into these workplaces, either virtual or in person, to deliver this content. So if you're an advisor, I know actually one of my advisors is listening to us right now. Hi, Ted. And who are involved. It's a great opportunity if you are a CPA Canada member, as well as inviting us in to your workplace to participate and have those discussions. It's always great to also have a third party talk about things
Right.
that are, meant to be objective. And then you can layer on the specifics of what that organization is providing from a benefits perspective.
Yeah,
Or
I think that was one of the things that resonated with me was that you offer that as a service to an advisor who may want to do a seminar or something, is that right? And I
yeah.
think that needs to be made clear to the people on the call today. And is there a charge for that? Do I call you up and say, I need a volunteer to come in and do a presentation on the 10 steps? Is there a charge from you to do that?
As long as you yourself are providing a free program. So we don't necessarily, so if it's like a community piece, community service, there is no charge to participate in the program, as long as it's not like for a feed conference or things like that, because it is part of our public service from
Yeah,
the profession.
perfect. I just wanted you to say it out loud. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and it's a high-tech world today, you folks have put together a podcast. Tell us a little bit about the podcast site because I listened to a couple today and it's pretty good.
Yeah, so Mastering Money. We're on a little bit of a hiatus because our wonderful host retired, and so we're doing kind of a uh, rejig of the content and the host. But yeah, Mastering Money. We've been doing it. We've got 9 seasons. Well, there's also a small business version for our small business clients and networks. But we cover such great topics. Like we have a whole season on debt, which
Hmm.
we know that so many Canadians are struggling.
Oh,
My favorite, the most popular one is probably how to talk to my teen, which I think scares a lot of parents to talk to them about money and now they shouldn't be spending
um,
it. But yeah, so check us out. We're on anywhere you would listen to podcasts, so whether that's Apple or Spotify or whatever.
actually, it's funny you mentioned household debt because Canadian household debt went up by 13% this last year.
Yeah. I
So it's
mean, a
getting
lot of that
worse.
is also mortgages, though. Like, I have to say, like, that sometimes can
Well, and
be,
those people are leveraging those mortgages. They're buying houses they can't afford and they're leveraging the mortgage to buy things they don't need.
yeah,
So,
it was, I mean, a personal story for a minute here. It was really crazy when I went to get a mortgage and they gave me some obscene number. And I'm like, I don't think this is right. And they said, "Oh no, as long as you can, put up the down payment." I said, "Forget that. There's no way I can afford this." And then lo and behold, but interest rates were at 1%. Now they're at
right,
4. I'd be totally broke. Totally
right
broke.
on. Perfect. Well, thanks very much for helping. I see David's here, so we're getting thrown off.
Yeah, we're getting the hook now.
Yeah, we're getting the hook. Or he's got something to ask us, and he's not
Or
mic'd.
he's on mute.
Unmute,
David,
unmute.
unmute.
I thought I'd unmuted. Actually, I'm not here to ask you anything. I'm just kind of, you guys are channeling like, I'm not sure if it's Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz or if it's Mary Tyler Moore and Ed Asner, but the energy between the two of you is outstanding. So, Lee, I'm just going to make a recommendation. If you're restructuring mastering money, you might want to make it mastering money with Lee and Don and like do half-hour weeklies. I'm tuning in. It was outstanding. You guys were just, the energy between you is fantastic. Thank you both so much for this. Don, you were a masterful moderator, just terrific. And Lee, terrific. Thank you so much.